Namaskar, dear learners and listeners. I am Anita Devraj, and today our topic of discussion is going to be the world wars. This is lesson 4 of your book on social sciences. Industrialization, colonialism, and imperialism had already created intense rivalry among the European nations over their possessions of colonies in Asia and Africa. We have already discussed this in our last episode. Now, in this episode, we are going to read more about those very areas which led to the World War. Now, the competition became more acute by the end of the 19th century when colonies were no longer available in Asia and Africa. Compromise was not possible due to mutual distrust and hostilities. And in 1914, a war began in Europe, which soon engulfed the entire world. It involved all the major countries of the world and their colonies. The damage caused by this war had no precedent in history. For the first time in history, all the resources of the warring states were mobilized. It involved their army, their navy, and their air force. The civilian population suffered tremendous casualties because of indiscriminate bombing. Since the war was spread over a very large part of the world, for the first time it is known as the World War I. It marked a turning point in world history. It was not a sudden occurrence, but the culmination of a large number of forces and developments covering a long period before 1914. Now, let us look into the causes of the World War. Imperialist rivalries among the different nations like England, France, Germany, and others were a major cause of the war. Earlier wars were averted because possibilities of acquiring more colonies were still there. But the situation had now changed. Most of Asia and Africa had already been divided up, and possibilities of further expansion were not there. It was possible only by dispossessing some imperialist country of their colony. This division of colonies created conditions of war. In the last quarter of the 19th century, Germany had made tremendous economic and industrial progress and left England and France far behind in industrial production. She needed colonies as much as Britain to fulfill her economic needs. In the imperial race, Germany became the major competitor of England. British naval supremacy was also challenged when Germany built the largest warship, Imperator, and built the Kiel Canal connecting the North Sea and Baltic Sea, endangering the English coastline. Germany also built a railway line connecting Berlin with Baghdad, which made it easier for Germany to send troops or supplies to the east. But it posed a threat to British colonies there. Like Germany, all other major powers of Europe and Japan also had their imperialist ambitions. Italy, after her unification, wanted Tripoli in North Africa, which was under the Ottoman Empire. France wanted to add Morocco to her conquest in Africa, while Russia had her ambitions in Iran. Japan had her ambitions in the Far East, where she was able to extend her influence after the Russo-Japanese War of 1905. Austria had her ambitions in the Ottoman Empire, while the United States of America was slowly emerging as a powerful nation. Her main interest was to preserve the independence of trade as it was increasing at a fast pace. The expansion of influence of any great power was posing a major threat to world peace. Now, the system of alliances also played a very important role in the World War. Conflicts and confrontations for more colonies prompted the imperial powers to look for allies. In 1882, Germany, Austria, and Italy signed the Triple Alliance, pledging mutual military assistance against rival powers. England, Russia, and France signed the Triple Entente in 1907. Emergence of two mutually opposed groups divided Europe into hostile camps, leading to tension and conflicts among European powers. These countries competed with one another in producing deadly weapons, which led to a race for armaments. Mutual hatred and suspicion disturbed the atmosphere of peace. The propaganda which was created made it clear that if war ever broke out, the whole of Europe would be drawn into it. Then there was the Pan-Slav movement and the Balkan politics. Balkan regions of Eastern Europe consisted of many states such as Greece, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, Montenegro, and many other small states. Originally, these states were under the control of the Ottoman Emperor or the ruler of Turkey. By the beginning of the 20th century, the Ottoman Empire began to decline. European powers, including Austria and Russia, rushed for obtaining a foothold in the region. The matter got more complicated with the resurgence of nationalism among the people in most of these states. They were called Slavs. Since they were scattered in many of the East European states, they started a national movement called the Pan-Slav movement. Their main demand was to unite the Slavs in one state under Serbia, the state which had the largest Slav population in this movement. Serbia was supported by Russia, whereas Austria opposed Serbia and the national movement. This resulted in rivalry between Russia and Austria. Austria did not want a strong Serbian state, which would hamper her ambition of expansion. In 1908, Austria annexed two Slav states, Bosnia and Herzegovina, leading to hostility between Serbia and Austria. Between 1912 and 1914, four Balkan states fought two wars against the Ottoman Emperor for independence. Turkey was defeated and lost all her possessions in Europe. Austria hurriedly set up an independent state of Albania against the Serbian ambition of Greater Serbia. Hostility mounted between Austria on one side and Serbia and Russia on the other. As you can see, by 1914, the atmosphere in Europe was explosive. Against this background, Archduke Francis Ferdinand, the heir to the Austrian throne, went to Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, on a state visit. As he was getting down from his car, he was assassinated by a Serbian youth on 28th June 1914. The murder of Archduke Francis Ferdinand became the immediate cause of the war. Austria held Serbia responsible for the assassination of their prince and served her with an ultimatum with various conditions. Assured of Russian help, Serbia refused to accept the ultimatum and started mobilizing her troops on the border. On 28 July 1914, Austria declared war on Serbia. On 1st August 1914, Germany declared war on Russia. On 3rd August 1914, Germany declared war on France. As German troops entered Belgium, England declared war on Germany on 4th August 1914. Thus, a minor incident in Europe triggered the war with all the countries joining in, which soon took the shape of World War I. Now, let us look into the course of the war, which started in 1914 and ended in 1918. World War I, which started in August 1914, continued till November 1918. During this period, many important battles were fought, such as the Battle of Marne in 1914, Battle of World-2, Battle of Somme, and Battle of Jutland in 1916. The year 1917 saw two important developments. One was the entry of US into the war in April, and second was the withdrawal of Russia from the war in November 1917. In 1915, a British passenger ship, Lusitania, was sunk by German U-boats, killing 128 United States civilians who were traveling in the ship. The United States Senate took a very serious view of this. Besides becoming a powerful nation, Germany would pose a threat to US supremacy. Moreover, USA being the major supplier of arms and ammunition, the continuation of war would result in economic advantage for the United States. Keeping all this in view, she decided to join the war in 1917. Do you remember reading about the October Revolution of 1917 in Russia? One of the major demands for the revolutionaries was peace. So, immediately after the revolution, under the leadership of Lenin, Russia withdrew from the war and signed a peace treaty with Germany in 1918. By July 1918, Germany began to collapse. Bulgaria and Turkey surrendered in September and October respectively. On 3rd November 1918, the Austrian Emperor surrendered due to widespread unrest in Austria. After similar revolts by the German people, German Emperor Wilhelm II fled to Holland and Germany was proclaimed a republic. The new government signed an armistice on 11th November 1918, bringing an end to World War I. In the course of the war, many new weapons such as machine guns, poison gas, liquid fire, submarine and tanks were used. New strategies and military techniques were experimented by both sides. England used naval and economic blockade, tanks and air raids. The French used trench warfare and Germany used U-boats and submarines to sink ships under the sea. Now, what do you think were the immediate consequences of the First World War? Do you know that the First World War was one of the most disastrous and frightening events the world had witnessed? 1 million people, including innocent civilians, lost their lives. There was a large scale damage of property in most of the European countries. The total expenditure was estimated at a staggering figure of $180 billion. The economy of most of the countries was shattered, resulting in social tension, unemployment and poverty. Between January and June 1919, the Allied powers met at a conference in the Palace of Versailles, Paris, to decide the future of the defeated powers. Though the representatives of nearly 27 countries attended the conference, the decisions were taken by heads of state of Britain, France and US. Russia was excluded and the defeated powers were not allowed to attend. The Allies signed different treaties with the defeated powers. The most important of them was the Treaty of Versailles signed with Germany. The most important of them were the Treaty of Versailles signed with Germany, the Treaty of Saint-Germain with Austria and the Treaty of Sèvres with Turkey. The Treaty of Versailles shattered Germany politically, economically and militarily. Germany was held guilty of aggression and was asked to pay a huge amount of money as compensation for the war. Alsace and Lorraine, which was taken from France in 1871, were to be returned to France. Rhineland, the land between France and Germany, was demilitarized and brought under the control of the Allied powers. The coal-rich Saar Valley was given to France for 15 years. German army was disbanded. Ships were sunk and the army was restricted to 1 lakh soldiers only. Germany was deprived of all her colonies. Much of her territories in Europe were given to Belgium and Poland. The Treaty of Saint-Germain separated Hungary from Austria and Hungary was made an independent state. Austria had to recognize the independence of Hungary and had to give parts of her territories to Czechoslovakia, Romania and Yugoslavia. The Treaty of Sèvres broke up the Ottoman Empire. Some of its states were given to the Allied powers as mandates. For example, Palestine and Mesopotamia were given to Britain and Syria to France. The Allied powers were to look after these countries till they became self-reliant. The war and the peace treaties transformed the political map of the world, particularly Europe. After the October Revolution in Russia, the ruling dynasty of the Romanovs was overthrown. By the end of the war, Hohenzollern dynasty of Germany and Habsburg dynasty of Austria were removed and republic government was set up. Monarchy was also abolished in Turkey after a revolution in 1922. Two new states, Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, were created out of the territories taken from the defeated powers. Hungary emerged as an independent state. Baltic states such as Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia and Finland were made independent states. The states of Romania and Poland were enlarged in size. All this changed the boundaries of most of the states of Europe. It was evident that the peace settlements were dictated and unequal settlements which were imposed upon the defeated powers. They had no say in the deliberations. The end of the war saw the end of European supremacy and emergence of USSR and USA as major powers. The period also saw the strengthening of the national movement in the countries of Asia and Africa. Even before the war ended in November 1918, the United States President Woodrow Wilson had proposed a peace program known as the Wilson's 14 points. The most important point was the proposal for the establishment of an international organization for maintaining peace and security in the world. On the basis of this proposal, the League of Nations was set up in 1920. Now, let us see what this League of Nations was all about. The League was the first international organization set up in 1920 with its headquarters at Geneva. Its main aim was to maintain peace and security in the world, prevent future wars, promote international cooperation, settle international disputes peacefully and improve the conditions of laborers in member countries. But unfortunately, the League failed to prevent war and conflict for which it was set up. When Italy attacked Ethiopia in 1935 and Japan attacked Manchuria in 1936, the League could do nothing. Also, mutual rivalries among nations for the possession of colonies continued, exposing their imperial ambitions. Now, let us look into some activities also for you. Earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not everyone's greed. Mahatma Gandhi said all this. Do you think this quote holds truth? Why? If yes, and why not? Justify with the help of examples and of course, look around you and find out if this quote stands true. Now, we will do the world war between the two world wars. The period of 20 years between the two world wars experienced tremendous changes. There was positive developments like national awakening in countries of Asia and Africa and popularity of socialist movements in the Soviet Union and in other countries. The world also saw the worst form of dictatorship in many countries of Europe, especially in Italy and Germany. A major economic crisis took place which affected almost every part of the world, particularly the most advanced countries of the West. The period also witnessed the worst economic depression in the United States in 1929. This depression affected the economy of the entire world. Now, let us see what were the causes for the growth of fascism and Nazism in Italy and Germany. After the war, a number of political movements arose in Europe, which was given the name fascism. They had a number of features which were common, that is, hostility to democracy and socialism, and the aim to establish dictatorship. They were supported by the rulers, the upper class aristocrats and the capitalists, because they promised to save them from the danger of socialism. They let loose a systematic campaign of terrorism and murder, which the government showed little interest in curbing. The dictatorship introduced in Italy by Mussolini is referred to as fascism. The term fascism is derived from Latin word fascis, which stood for symbols of authority in ancient Rome. In 1922, Mussolini came to power with the support of the Italian king and ruled like a dictator from 1925 to 1943. Mussolini banned all political parties and introduced some reforms to get the support of the people. The arrogance of Victorian powers, the inability of the existing governments to cope up with post-war problems, the helplessness of the League of Nations, and failure of democratic forces to check fascism made the rise of dictatorship possible. The German version of fascism is known as Nazism. It was established by Adolf Hitler. He promised to reverse post-war settlements and restore German power and glory. His vision of rebuilding Germany into a great nation inspired many Germans to join him. It acted like a balm on the wounds caused by the humiliation after the First World War. Many people supported Nazism because it seemed to offer a way out of the economic decline. The success of the Nazis proved disastrous, not only for the German people, but for the entire Europe and many parts of the world. It led to dictatorships being established in Hungary, Romania, Portugal, and Spain. The growth of anti-democratic governments in so many countries led to the Second World War. Now, let us also look into the developments in other parts of the world also. England and France too had to face severe economic crisis, scarcity and unemployment, but they continued with their democratic governments. Despite worker strikes and other disturbances in England, the problems were sought to be solved by forming a coalition government consisting of Labour, Liberal and Conservative parties in 1931. In France, a Popular Front government consisting of left-wing parties was set up in 1936. Soviet Union emerged as the first socialist state of the world. Under the new government, socialist principles were introduced in economy, and it was the only country to remain unaffected while all the Western countries suffered the economic depression of 1929. The USA participated in the First World War. The country did not suffer much material loss. Industrial prosperity, political stability and economic growth made it a superpower. However, she suffered the worst economic crisis in 1929 due to overproduction. Prices of commodities declined, leading to the fall in share prices. The banks closed down and people lost their lifelong savings. The loan which USA had given to the European countries after the First World War had to be withdrawn. It resulted in economic instability in the European countries also. The new government that came to power in USA under Franklin Roosevelt introduced a program of economic recovery called the New Deal. Under this, many reforms were introduced, such as creating new employment opportunities, giving help to the farmers, etc. Japan was the only country in Asia which emerged as an imperialist country. You must have also read how it defeated Russia in 1905. During this period, between the two world wars, Japan became a strong military power and supported fascism. She signed the Rome-Berlin-Tokyo Axis with the fascist powers. She also signed the Anti-Comintern Pact to check the spread of communism along with Germany and Italy, indicating their hostility to the Soviet Union. You have already read about the League of Nations and how it failed in its aim within 20 years after its formation. Even though it was set up with the aim of preventing future world wars, World War II started on September 1939. In another episode, we will discuss about the causes of the Second World War. Till then, thank you very much.